Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is November 12th, and today's lesson is called Go Tell. So here we start with the missionary journeys of Saul/Paul, and we'll talk about that today as well. So the verse I'm looking at is Acts chapter 13, verse 1. It says, among the prophets and teachers of the church at Antioch of Syria were Barnabas, Simeon, called the Black Man, Lucius from Cyrene, Manaen, the childhood companion of King Herod Antipas, and Saul. One day these men were worshiping the Lord and fasting. And the Holy Spirit said, Appoint Barnabas and Saul for the special work to which I have called them. And there we begin. Now, we're in chapter 13. And I feel like I need to do a little bit of backstory here before. So what we're going to talk about today is Paul's first missionary journey. So this is where some geography would be very helpful to you. Now, the last time I showed this book, I think all copies were bought. It is out of print, which I did not know when I showed it. But then when I showed it, and wham, y'all started saying, I can't find it. And then it was like, it all got bought up on Amazon. So there are some used booksellers that you can find this on. So with fear and trepidation do I show this book. This is What the Bible's All About resource book. Now, many of you have found Rose Publishing, like Rose the Flower. Rose Publishing puts together some really great map and chart books. And many of you have used those. I think when we looked at the Kings and I showed this, you found that. So that's a great resource for you as well. So if you're interested in those type of things. Most study Bibles will have maps of Paul's missionary journeys. And so you'll find those. But it is, unless you're a super duper student of geography and can know everything, this will help you. So open up your study Bible, find those maps, and look at where these places are. Because once you start seeing the names of places, it will help you understand the book of Acts so much more. Because like lickety-split, like that, Paul's first missionary journey, which lasts for 2 years, is over. Because he goes from here to there, back, boom, 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 boom. I'm going to list all of them in your notes. But a map of it is very helpful because places will start sticking with you. And when you see them come up again, you're like, oh, Paul went there before. Yes. Okay. So, a good map. So, like this one has Paul's first missionary journey, Paul's second missionary journey, Paul's third missionary journey, Paul's journey to Rome. And then, so that's very helpful. But here's what has been going on in our story. So, Saul is converted to a Christian, and then he just sort of disappears into Tarsus. And he tried, the people in the church in Jerusalem really didn't trust him. And so, he ends up back in Tarsus. And so Barnabas is sent by the Jerusalem church to check out what's going on in Antioch. There's been a rise in, this is Antioch of Syria, because now we're going to start getting confusing. There's two Antiochs. There's Syrian Antioch, or Antioch of Syria, and Antioch of Pisidia, which is going to be on this first missionary journey. Two separate places. Antioch of Syria is the first place back in chapter 11, verse 26. It's the first time the followers of the way are called Christians. The very first time is at the Church of Antioch. Antioch of Syria. And so it's helpful to see that on a map, because that is that is Paul's home base. How did he get to Antioch? So, he got there because the Jerusalem church sent Barnabas to check out what was going on with the rise in the growth of the church at Antioch. He's like, they wanted him to go check it out and make sure these were true conversions and all of that. And on the way, he said, I wonder what has happened to Saul. So he goes by and spends a year in Tarsus with Saul, and then takes Saul with him to Antioch. And then while they're there, the church at Antioch sends them out. So they're their sending church. The church at Antioch sends out, what it says is Saul and Barnabas, prays on them, and sends them out. Because the gospel is to go forth to the ends of the earth. Now, in this journey, you will notice in, hold on, I'll tell you the verse. In this, you will notice, I had it written down. Chapter 13, verse 9. You will see, it all of a sudden tells you Saul, also known as Paul. That's the last time you ever see the name Saul written. In the book of Acts, or in any of the letters, Paul is never used again. Because what has just happened? They have left the Hebrew world and now are going into the Roman world with the gospel. Saul is his Hebrew name. Paul is a Roman name. That's his Roman name. So you see this with Cephas, who is also, or Simon Peter. You see that as well. You see it with Matthew, also known as Levi. Those type of things. So that's what's going on here. Is Paul is his Roman name. There's a huge misconception. Never says God changes his name to Paul. It's not changed until he goes as being sent into the Gentile world, that his name is changed. And so from this point forward, he is known as Saul. In chapter 13, verse 9, that's the last time you'll see the name of Saul. And then you go forward and now he's Paul. And it's because of what God's called him to do and where he's going. So, now, this first journey with Barnabas will last for 2 years, 46 and 47 AD. Those are the years. So here we are, all these, time flies fast in the Bible. For all these years, we just didn't we just read the crucifixion last week? Yes. That was 33 AD, now we're 46, 47 AD. And so, so what you see is Paul and Barnabas have a method. This is their method of evangelism. They go to a place, and when they get there, if there's a synagogue, they will go to the synagogue and sit. And then when the leaders or the elders of the synagogue invite them into conversation, Paul presents the gospel. Now, many times they're kicked out. Paul is beaten. He is stoned. All of these things happen. They take him out to the side of the city, stone him, and leave him for dead. So, sometimes it works, but he keeps on going. So, now, if you have the map, or if you have anything, here's our journey. Okay, so in chapter 13, we are sent from Antioch, in chapter 13, verses 1 through 3. Now, I'm not listing all of the verses. I'm going to list the places. So, I'm going to list the places for you. So, pay attention and pause if you need to. 13 verses 1 through 3, they go to, they're in Antioch. That's where they're prayed over and sent out. The first trip is to Seleucia in chapter 13, verse 4. In chapter 13, verse 5, they have sailed to Cyprus. In Salamis, which is chapter 13, verses 6 through 12, they proclaim the word of God in synagogues with John Mark, who John Mark sort of comes and goes. When things get rough, he hightails it back home. But that will stop. And he is the John Mark who wrote the book of Mark. And so, in Paphos is where you see Paul to Saul. From Saul to Paul. Sorry. And then in chapter 13, verse 13, we go to Perga. in chapter 13, verse 14 through 52, we're in Pisidian Antioch. Remember, different Antioch. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Then we go into a region called Galatia. Now, this is important because we get to the book of Galatians is written to the church of Galatia. But it's like saying, I live in North Carolina. And it's like saying the letter to the North Carolinians, but there's lots of cities there. That's what's going on here. So Iconium and Lycaonia and Lystra. Lystra is where we don't meet him right here, but later on we're going to meet Timothy in Lystra. And so Lystra is where he's stoned. So we're in chapter 14 now. And he's stoned, and then they end up in Derbe. And then what they do is they retrace their steps. They go back and go in chapter 14. They preach the gospel. And then they go back in Lystra, Iconium, and Pisidia. They go back encouraging and strengthening the elders for tribulation, the things that are to come. So they go back encouraging the churches that they had made, where they will where Paul will write a letter to them. Then they go back to Perga, and then they go to Atalea, I think that's how you say it. And then they sail to Antioch, where they then give their report in chapter 14, verses 26 and 27 to the church at Antioch, or the church Syrian Antioch. So, that's the first travels of Paul. Now, when he gets back, there's some major things that happen. Now scholars have different views on this. I believe this is when he writes the book of Galatians. Because he gets back, there's an uproar, they go to see the church at Jerusalem, and there's the whole Jerusalem council. I believe, according to some scholars differ on this, and it makes the most sense that right here is Galatians, and I also think Galatians was written early, based on the doctrine that is in other books. That mainly Galatians I always consider as a mini Romans. So if Galatians is the first thing he writes and Romans is one of the last things he writes, that you see it fully developed. So the ideas of Romans are present in Galatians, and you will see those happen. But the Jerusalem Council happens, and so there's a response there, and so that's what's going on here. But I want us to look at a big thing here, that what enabled Paul to preach the gospel is the peace that was present at this time traveling. Why is there peace? Because Paul got converted. He was leading the persecution. He was the reason no one could go and tell. He got converted. He became a Christian, and then he went to tell. It is the great reversal that God always does. So Paul, who was Saul, who was killing Christians, is now the one preaching the gospel, and is being beat and stoned just like he did to others. It is an amazing thing. This is what I tell my students all the time. Who in your life is your Saul? Someone you could never think would become a Christian. I challenge my students today to pick someone they are praying for to become, to get saved. I said, find someone. We're working on how to pray right now, and how, I said, so we're praying for the unsaved. I said, that's a big number. I said, I want you to make it specific. And I said, here's what you do. You don't go tell that person you're praying for them, because then you're getting all prideful. So you pray specifically for one person, and you pray for that person consistently. Because what God can do with a life redeemed and sold out to him is what we see in the life of Paul. who one day is murdering Christians, the next day he is one, and then he is preaching the gospel. The greatest evangelist of our generation could be the person you least expect to become a Christian. Don't hold back the gospel because how you think people will respond. We're not responsible for the response. We're responsible to go and tell. It's the beauty of the gospel. He includes us. He includes us in building the kingdom. He's so good. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.